Great to have you on today, Luke. Just for some of our listeners, I'll give some context on you for those who don't know. Luke is the co-founder and CEO of Mosea, a digital payments app that specializes in bill splitting. And to our listeners that go to university in Canada, I can almost guarantee that you've seen this brand around campus at some point. I remember seeing Mosea flags and merch at Queen's ever since I arrived on campus in first year, and it's been really cool to see the brand grow over the last couple of years. So great to have you on today, Luke.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Could we just start with a brief introduction of what Mosey really is and what you guys do there, and then maybe give us the founding story of how you and your co-founders came to start this thing?
Yeah. So essentially, how I guess what Mosey is at its forefront is a hybrid between Eventbrite and Venmo. So anything from groups needing to transfer money from two people all the way up to call it 200,000 people. That's what we help facilitate. If you look at the states, Venmo and Cash App are the dominant players there. And they're all focused around social payments with friends, being able to create these groups. They've got a Splitwise API that's integrated into them so you can split bills and whatnot with groups of people. And we have nothing like that here in Canada, predominantly because Interac e-transfer is so prevalent. And so what you've seen and one of the biggest hurdles for us is actually tackling Interac e-transfer because it is such a convenient option. Everyone knows exactly how it works, and it's so ingrained into Canadian culture that it's very hard to get them to switch to the platform. And then because open banking isn't really a thing at all in Canada, and there are so many fintechs that are putting a ton of pressure on making this happen, it's very difficult to get the user experience to what it is with Interac e-transfer because you don't have these real-time payment rails that allow you to instantaneously transfer money at a price that's reasonable enough for these micro payments, $20 transferring your buddy back to make a lot of sense. So it's a super, super challenging problem, but it is a necessity and it's a much easier way to do things. And so I guess that's one of the things is just transferring money back and forth to one another. And then you also have the event side of the platform. And so the event side allows you to set up your own events, for whether that be for a club conference or a charity fundraiser or any type of party you might be having, and then collect money for that. Our fees are cheaper than what they are for Eventbrite, who's the leader in this space, and then we charge nothing to the host, and we try to do as much as we can for the host by helping sponsor their parties and put them in touch with other sponsors as well to make sure that these are as successful as possible. Because when we were in university, we would plan a lot of different events, and the biggest challenge was collecting money and then getting hosed on fees, because the take rate from Eventbrite ends up being around 10% by the time all things are said and done. And especially when you're planning these small scale events, every dollar matters. So that's, at its whole what it is.
Why don't you give us the founding story? So how did you and your co-founders come to really start this thing?
Yeah. So I guess back in university, there was one of the big things that I did is I would plan all of these different kind of esports tournaments. So when I was in first year, a bunch of the guys on my floor played on the soccer team, and we would set up these FIFA tournaments on FIFA 16. That eventually led to Fortnite coming out, and I got super into Fortnite with one of my buddies, and so we kind of kept the same strategy and planned all these Fortnite events. And so what would happen though is a lot of people, because it was so local, but then it started expanding. Essentially, it started at my residence, and then as I got out of first year, it expanded to other people throughout campus. It expanded to other campuses. It eventually expanded to a bunch of people across Canada. Some people wanted to pay through the website, some people through Interac e-transfer, some people through cash, and there were all these different forms of payment that were coming in. And I wanted to make it as convenient as possible for these people to join the platform, or to join the tournaments. So I would accept all these different methods. We had this payment platform at the time called Tilt, which went out of business and sold to Airbnb. But when I was, from 2015 to 2017, it was all I used. I never used I never used e-transfer at all. And essentially what we tried to create Mosey is, or so after this company, finished and it was sold off to the Ontario Sports League, we eventually went and decided we were having so much trouble with collecting all these payments for all of these different things. And Tilt had just gone out of business, and that's why it became so difficult to collect all these payments. So we basically just really tried to recreate exactly what Tilt was.
What was going on in your head when you were in fourth year, like about to graduate? Were you planning on maybe doing a corporate job, or was this kind of when you were like, all right, we need to do something about this idea and put into action?
Yeah. I think in fourth year, the one thing that I realized, so I had other jobs throughout university that I didn't really enjoy because I felt kind of just like a cog in the machine. And you could see that, part of working corporate life is you start to work your way up through companies, right? So you start somewhere at the bottom of the totem pole, and you provide value and do the right things, and you slowly start to wake your way up, and you get more autonomy and whatnot. I just found that you don't get to really choose. So culture in any single company is always created at the top, and then it trickles down throughout the rest of the company. And I realized that the number one thing that you want in your career is two things. One, you want to make sure that you're satisfied with the money that you're making, whatever number that actually is. But two, and what I think is most important is you're spending so much time in your career, and it's where you get all of your purpose. So you need to be spending it with the people that you actually want to be spending it with. And there's no better way to do that than getting a group of like-minded people that think the same way as you, that want to have the same goals as you, giving everyone skin in the game via equity, and trying to build something together. And again, when you're young, like the big thing when you're young is if it fails, like who cares? You're just this bundle of potential when you come out of university. You're going to learn more in 6 to 12 months out of university than you will in your entire career in university. And it's just about having that bias towards action. So I don't really care if it failed at all. I think that I just wanted to work with people and try and build something and develop my skills on my own and see if I was capable and see exactly where my potential was. And so that's really what stemmed from wanting to start my own thing. And then again, just having this problem of splitting money and transferring money throughout Canada and seeing Interac e-transfer being around since like the late 90s and how archaic it was in terms of innovation, especially once you go underneath the hood and you realize exactly how Interac e-transfer works. You realize that there definitely is a need for something. It's just such an incredibly difficult problem to solve. And the way you go after this problem, this might get a little off track, but the way you go after this problem is going after university students and people who have super dense viral networks where there's always people talking with one another. As you get older, you don't see that as much. People are much more secluded. They've got much smaller friend groups. They've got much smaller circles. When you're in university, everyone's talking, everyone's doing these things. So it's the most obvious way is to target the university students and even potentially high school students. The thing is because university students and high school students are probably the most open-minded to everything that's going on, especially in pop culture, but beyond pop culture, in little niches as well. They've got so much access to information through Instagram and TikTok. They are incredibly hard to please and very, very particular. And so it makes this whole entire thing with how monopolistic the system is, how challenging it is to build this infrastructure in a way that's actually user-friendly, and then satisfying people who have the highest of expectations. And so I guess that's a huge thing.
It must be so cool to see people actually use something that you made, especially university students. Like you were once in our shoes, I guess. So, linking people to parties and events, like it's a really cool thing. But I want to dive a little deeper into the early stages of building Mosey. So, how did you find your co-founders? And obviously, a big part of getting a SaaS company off the ground is finding a technical co-founder and someone to actually build the application. So, can you walk me through what that process was like?
Yeah. So I guess when I was thinking about it, so how I planned how I thought about the esports company that we built was who was the person. One guy came up to me and him and I were the ones who were like always planning these different types of events. And so when I had graduated from that and onto what Mosey was eventually going to be, I thought to myself, who are the brightest people that I would, one, love working with, but two, are capable of building this. And the two people that I knew right off the top of my head were my two of my really, really close friends, Aiden and Colin. Aiden at the time actually went to Queen's University. He was working a job at Queen's Park for the government at the time. And while he was in university, he would plan all these events. So he would bring in some big acts like I believe the Chainsmokers and Loud Luxury and whatnot to stages. And so he would plan all of these different events, which was super, super useful for the event side of the platform, knowing exactly what kind of features you need as an event organizer, what goes into actually planning an event and what event hosts actually want. And then on the technical side, Colin, he was actually going to go to med school. And he ended up making the decision to not pursue that path and follow on Mosey. And he was more of the technical side. So he actually only had a minor in computer science, but he decided to just take this full on and decide, listen, I can figure this out on my own. And so with Colin developing the technical side, which eventually got to a point where we could raise money and then hire a proper CTO and a proper technical team that can actually build this technology out. That was really what were the two forms of people that were needed to start this company, and that's really where it went. And then again, we raised money, and that allowed us to hire the rest of our team. Again, with how difficult the system is, because you need third-party vendors for essentially everything when you're doing this type of micropayments. The system, the technology is incredibly difficult to build. So like, and we know this firsthand, our technology isn't where it needs to be. And a lot of it is because we have to rely so hard on third-party vendors, and figuring out that situation is still one of the things, we think about on a daily basis.
I want to get into the investors part and raising money. So had you had any experience pitching to investors prior, and what was that experience like for you? Like, did you obviously that requires some sales skills, some public speaking skills. Were those things that came naturally to you, or did you really have to work hard to build those skills?
Yeah, I think it was like the public speaking. I thoroughly enjoy public speaking, so I don't think that was too difficult. And then I think if you're genuinely passionate about something, you genuinely believe in something, you're gonna just be able to express it as it is. I think you also have to have a component of being super rational and understand, like, listen, although any person who starts a company who genuinely believes in it, there is no doubt in their mind that they think it's going to succeed, especially at the beginning. But the thing is realistically it's not going to succeed, and so you have to remember that as and kind of balance that act. So I think when we first started pitching, the one thing that we had is, prior to this, I was generating revenue and from this other company, and so was able to put my own money, literally all of my own money, into the company at the beginning to be able to build sort of this MVP product, which was just a website at the time, but we had the technical infrastructure, we had a plan of how we were going to get to the next steps. And then in venture funding, it's very similar, very simple. You basically say you need to raise this much money to get to these milestones. If these milestones make sense to the investor, and then at those milestones, you'll be able to raise your next round. And again, investors at the time just want to make sure that you can get to the next step. And so that made a lot of sense. And I pitched, I think the first time, about 100 or 150 investors, which is what you typically get. Two people ended up coming in for about 350 grand for our first round. That grew us to a few thousand users and hit our milestones that we said we were going to hit, which allowed us to raise another $1 million. And then that milestone got us to our next round, which we raised, a couple $1 million. And again, now we're on track. Now we're really growing really, really quickly. There's a lot of problems with our tech right now, just here and there for some of our users, and so we have to get rid of all these edge cases. But we're right on the path to being able to get to this, a proper Series A. And actually, we're profitable this month. We've actually been profitable for the past few months, which is a huge milestone, because now we can kind of raise on our own terms and when we want to.
Congrats. That's amazing. It must be an amazing feeling to have investors buy into your service and what you believe in. Um, One thing I wanted to ask you about, I remember hearing you talk on a podcast not too long ago, and you talked about this importance of being of naivety and being naive as a young person in their career, and how that can lead you to do amazing things. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think there's a bunch of ways you can go with that, but if you knew, so I can't remember what the CEO's name of Nvidia is. I heard him speak about it a while ago, but he was basically saying if he realized how hard it was going to be to build Nvidia is right now, I think it's $1 trillion company, which is just insane. But if he realized how hard it would have been to build Nvidia, and this guy's worth like 100 billion plus at this point, 50 to 100 billion plus, he's built a company that's worth $1 trillion, he would have never started the company. And you don't realize that when you first go in, especially when you're young and you're like, realistically, when you're young and dumb and you're 22 years old and you're just coming out of university and you've just been in this little bubble of university students partying and just going to school and going through the motions, you don't really realize how difficult some things are, especially building a company from scratch, doing everything yourself, finding the people, making sure everyone works well together, hitting different milestones, dealing with the egos of everyone. And usually when you're building tech, everyone is relatively smart. Their IQs are above 105 or 110. So it's very, very difficult balancing everything. along with how pissed off customers get when things go wrong, especially being a financial app because it's their money, their hard-earned money. So you just have to be so naive and take the advice of like, what's the next step? Just do the next step and do the next step and do the next step. And then you get to a point where you've gotten so far that you look back and you say, wow, this is so difficult, but like, how hard can the next step be? I mean, it can only be so hard. So let's just keep moving. You don't want to give up all the investment of time and other people's time and energy that you've put into it. And so you just simply keep going. And I think one of the huge attributes of successful entrepreneurs is perseverance. And I know that's such cliche bullshit, but it's so true. It's just keep going. Do not stop. Do not give up no matter what, and always give 100%, 110% effort. I've never seen a founder that legitimately never stops and gives 100%, 10% effort fail. And then it goes back to the mantra that, companies will fail, especially, if you're starting up your first company or your second company or your third company, companies will fail, but entrepreneurs will not fail. And so if you just keep going and you keep sticking to something, you'll see it succeed. If you look at all of the guys from Silicon Valley that got to Silicon Valley in, call it 2010. So guys like Sean Purry and Sam Parr and those guys, they started one or two or three companies that didn't really work out. And some of their buddies started one or two or three companies that didn't work out. And some of those buddies ended up working consulting jobs or going to other jobs where they were starting to make 150 or 200K a year and started to play it safe. And they got the entrepreneurial kind of bug out of them. But the guys that kept going, they're now the ones who are making, 8 figures and doing really, really well. And so the thing is you got to kick the self-doubt at your head and just keep going.
I want to hear about kind of instances where you had to persevere, especially in the early days of building Mosey. Were there any major roadblocks in the early stages or massive challenges that you had to overcome, and any stories you want to tell there?
Yeah. Oh man, like everything. Like I think one of the things that you realize is 10% of things go right, 90% of things go wrong every single time. And I think that might actually be generous. And so like we had this MVP out, which was a website. And so we launched the website on January 20th of 2020, and it was doing pretty well. We were starting to gain users and bring in revenue. We hadn't raised money at this point. We realized really quickly that we were going to need revenue to sustain ourselves, or money, cash flow to sustain ourselves. And we started pitching investors. On March 10th, we ended up closing the 350 grand. And on March 16th, COVID ended up happening. So we already knew COVID was a thing. We didn't know we were going to get shut down. On March 16th, everything got shut down. That made it incredibly difficult because our entire platform was based around social spending. And so this made us essentially focus 100% of our effort on virtual events and anything else that could bring in revenue. So we were putting on like video game tournaments again. We were putting on any type of workout that people were doing online. We would try to get them to collect their tickets through us. We would do whatever we can to provide value to them. And COVID went on for a lot longer than we thought. At the time, we started building out our app, and we hired a CTO and a small team, in-house team that's all based in Toronto to help build this. And we thought that it was going to launch 6 to 8 months after we started building this. So we planned all of our marketing and budgets and everything being on the 6 to 8 month to push really hard. And it ended up taking about a year and a half for this thing to actually launch. And so it took an extra year for us we were just pushing and grinding and constantly, we would tell our investors, hey, it's coming out in 8 weeks. And we probably told them that like 6 times. And we were telling users that. And so it was just a lot of, hey, you guys keep telling us this and it's just not coming out. That was a lot of burden. And then we were thinking, hey, is this ever going to come out? When it came out, it wasn't as good as we wanted it to be. People didn't like the app like we thought it was going to be. They didn't catch on to it as quickly as we wanted. And so it was a lot of iterating. And then we needed to get a huge launch out, like even 6 months ago or 5 months ago. We got the launch out. However, there were some major bug flaws in it. And so the first 1,000 people that came on to try it, which were brand new, which we were excited to use it, they all had so many problems with it, which caused a huge cohort of people, specifically at one school, to just hate the product, hate the brand. And so that's very, very hard to come back from, especially when you ruin your reputation. It's very difficult to build your reputation, but it's incredibly easy to ruin your reputation. And so there's been so many different obstacles, getting down to very low amounts of cash in the bank, but then hitting the milestones and convincing some investors to come in and ended up raising that money. And so now I think we're starting to see the fruits of being in the game now for 3 or 4 years. But every step along the way, every day is just a stressful, complete disaster, especially if it's not going well, which I think you need. I'd rather have had that than, been a part of the 2021 boom and started something in crypto and just see something skyrocket and not be able to handle hardship when it actually comes.
That's super cool. Luke, I'm curious, what's been your biggest takeaway from all this? Just growing a company as a young CEO?
Yeah, it by far is the most challenging thing you will ever do in your entire life. Like there is absolutely nothing harder. I think it makes you incredibly humble. I think it creates it really adds perspective on every company you see. You you realize how difficult it was for that person or that team to get it to where it was today, whether that's Starbucks or McDonald's or any company. You think they just provide this amazing service right now, but at one point it was a disaster and it was incredibly hard for them to get to where they were today. And it's way more challenging underneath the hood than you actually think. So I just have a super intense appreciation for the entire infrastructure of the world and society and how things operate. And then I think, other takeaways are working with people you love working with. It legitimately makes work feel like play. Like every morning I love coming into the office. I love staying late in the office because you're with all the guys. You're talking about different things that are going on with the company, but you're laughing the whole time while you're doing it. You're all grinding together. You're all focused on one single mission, and it gives you so much purpose. You're so fulfilled every day you come home. Things that you have to work on, and you just want to keep doing it. Because I think like a lot, like even when I was in university and I see a lot of other peers and whatnot, like it's very hard to figure out what you want to do in life and have a plan and figure out, like why am I here. And I think starting a company and having something where you're kind of making the direction of it with your team is the most rewarding thing you can possibly do. So the best life experience, and I cannot recommend it enough.
That's so cool to know that that exists, that type of work culture and environment. I mean, I hope everyone gets to experience that one day. Um,
Yeah.
but I know we're getting close to time here, Luke. So one question, maybe to wrap things up here, that I've been asking some of my guests is, what advice do you have to someone who's in my position, who's in university or about to finish university, with an interest in entrepreneurship, but they're not really sure where to start?
Yeah. I think within entrepreneurship is interesting. I think that especially when you're in fourth year, it's really scary, especially if you don't have a job lined up at this time or whatnot. I think what you need to do is think about it very, very practically and on exactly what you want to do. And so there's a few ways that you can do that. Is the number one thing and I think Albert Einstein said this, where he was like, an idiot with a plan will always beat a genius without a plan. And so the number one thing that you see, and if you look at all of your friends and anyone who's listening to this, if you look at everyone, in your circle and other circles, a lot of people have no idea what they want to do with their lives. They've got no idea what beyond 6 months looks like for them. They don't think in intervals that are 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They think very short term. It's how am I going to get this job? When am I going to get this job? Like they're applying, their heads down. And then they get the job. And then what happens is once you get the job, you start working in it, but you get slightly complacent. And so you start to think, okay, like I'm trying to get this promotion, but you think very, very, you think with basically horse blinders on. And so I think that you should really sit down with yourself, write down exactly what you want to have in your life. Like what would be a good income? What would be, actually where you would be, this is successful, this is happy. And at least you have some sort of plan that you can follow along. Just having a plan where you can go to something and you say, okay, I'm gonna apply. This is kind of the industry I want to work in based on my interests. You have a plan for, you want to get this job, where you see your things going in this job. If you want to be there for 1 year or 2 year or 3 years, what you actually want to do later on in your career. At the beginning, you're gonna have to just grind hard and do SDR or BDR shit where you're just, kind of going through the motions. But how are you going to get out of that? How are you going to get to the next step? And as you create that plan, and if you continue to, consciously reflect on that plan, you'll have this outer star here, and you'll start going towards it, and you'll realize, hey, maybe I didn't want to be here, maybe I want to be here, but now at least you've got a better sense of direction. And so you're just trying to, direct yourself to a point where you're actually happy. But if you stay in one position, you get hit by inertia, and you tend to just stay in that complacent, direction that you're going in. And so I think you just got to have that bias towards action with a plan in front of you, and things will change, but you'll at least be moving in the right direction. And so I think that's really, really important, and as broad as I can get it.
That's super inspiring. I mean, I hope what you said today and how inspiring your story is can help inspire students to maybe take action on their business idea or get started on something they've been thinking about. Because, I mean, you're a living proof that it works if you persevere enough and put in enough work. But thanks again, Luke, for chatting with me today. I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.